They laughed at him because he wore worn-out shoes. They ignored him because he carried a mop. But the night he stepped between cruelty and kindness, everything changed. The Silver Crown Hotel in Boston glowed like a palace built on secrets. Crystal chandeliers reflected off marble floors, polished so perfectly they looked like mirrors. It was the annual Winter Hearts Charity Ball, where the city's richest donors gathered to prove, at least for one night, that money could buy morality. No one noticed Daniel Reed. That was normal. At 41, Daniel had perfected the art of being invisible. He moved quietly, pushing his cleaning cart along the edges of the grand ballroom, eyes lowered, shoulders slightly bent. His uniform was clean but old, his black shoes cracked at the sides. He earned $22 an hour, just enough to survive, never enough to rest. His hands were rough from years of scrubbing floors, his back ached, and tonight his mind was heavy. His father, Arthur, sat alone at home, slipping further into confusion every day. Dementia was stealing him piece by piece. Some days Arthur remembered Daniel as a boy, other days he didn't remember him at all. Daniel worked nights because the pay was better, because medication was expensive, because love, it turned out, cost more than money. Across the ballroom, laughter exploded near the champagne fountain. Daniel looked up. An elderly woman stood there, trembling. Her silver hair was pinned neatly, but her dress, once elegant, looked slightly outdated, like it belonged to another decade. Her hands clutched a small purse as if it were the only solid thing in the room. Her name was Margaret Hale. She was lost. Margaret took a hesitant step forward, her eyes wide and confused by the noise, the lights, the moving bodies. She reached out instinctively, brushing the arm of a woman standing nearby. That woman froze. Vanessa Crowley, a senator's wife and a regular headline, looked down at her white designer gown just as red wine spilled across the silk. The room went silent. "What have you done?" Vanessa shrieked, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Margaret recoiled. I'm sorry," she whispered. "I thought you were my sister. The lights, they move." Vanessa stepped closer, fury twisting her face. "Do you have any idea how much this dress costs? You don't belong here." People stared. No one moved. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest. Vanessa grabbed Margaret's wrist. "You're going to clean this up, on your knees, now." Margaret's legs shook. Tears filled her eyes as she slowly bent, humiliation crushing what little dignity she had left. That's when Daniel dropped his mop. The sound echoed louder than it should have. He didn't think, he didn't plan, he just moved. Daniel crossed the ballroom quickly, ignoring the looks, the whispers, the unspoken rule that men like him stayed out of the way. He stepped directly between Vanessa and Margaret, placing himself like a wall. "Let her go," Daniel said. His voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. Vanessa stared in disbelief. "Who do you think you are?" Daniel gently helped Margaret upright, his hands careful, respectful. "She's scared, and she's someone's mother." The crowd murmured. Vanessa laughed, cold and cruel. "You're a janitor. Know your place." Daniel met her eyes. "My place," he said quietly, "is right here." From the shadowed balcony above, Alexander Hale watched everything. The city knew him as a shipping tycoon. The underworld knew him as something far more dangerous. But in that moment, he wasn't watching as a king. He was watching as a son. And for the first time in years, someone had stood up for his mother.
Before we get into the moment, tell me, comment below which city and state you are, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like right now to join our community. The ballroom felt colder after Daniel Reed spoke. Vanessa Crowley's smile cracked just for a second, not because she felt shame, but because something unexpected had happened. A man who was supposed to be invisible had refused to disappear. "Security," she snapped, straightening her wine-stained gown. "Remove this man, and take that woman with him." Daniel didn't move. He felt Margaret's hand tighten around his sleeve. Her fingers were thin, trembling like autumn leaves. She looked up at him, eyes cloudy but trusting, the way his own father looked at him on the bad days. "It's all right," Daniel whispered. "I've got you." Above them, Alexander Hale finally stepped out of the shadows. He descended the staircase slowly, deliberately, every step commanding attention without asking for it. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even Vanessa went silent. Everyone knew Alexander Hale. His wealth had built half the port of Boston. His influence reached places no one spoke about out loud. He didn't need to raise his voice. The room bent toward him like metal to a magnet. He stopped a few feet away. "Mother," Alexander said softly. Margaret turned her head. Her face lit up like the sun breaking through fog. "Alex," she asked, "did you see the lights? They're beautiful." Alexander swallowed. "Yes, Mama, I see them." Only then did he look at Daniel. Daniel felt the weight of that gaze. Not anger, not threat. Curiosity, respect. Vanessa recovered quickly. "Mr. Hale," she said sweetly, "I'm so glad you're here. Your mother caused quite a scene. This man interfered." Alexander's eyes never left Daniel. "Is that so?" "She ruined my dress, and he spoke to me in a very inappropriate way." Alexander turned to his mother. "Mama, did he hurt you?" Margaret shook her head. "No, he saved me. He stopped the floor from taking me away." Something shifted in Alexander's face. He removed his jacket and placed it around his mother's shoulders. Then he looked at Vanessa. "Leave," he said calmly. "Excuse me?" "You're done here. Now." The hotel manager appeared instantly, pale and sweating. "Mrs. Crawley, if you'll please—" "This isn't over," Vanessa hissed as she was escorted away. "You'll regret this." Alexander didn't respond. Instead, he turned back to Daniel. "What's your name?" he asked. Daniel Reed." Alexander nodded. "You protected my mother when no one else did." "I should have," Daniel shrugged awkwardly. "But no one did," Alexander replied. Margaret reached for Daniel's hand. "He's kind. Don't let him go." Alexander made a decision in that moment. "Daniel," he said, "walk with us." Daniel's heart began to pound. "Sir, I have a shift." "You don't anymore." They moved through the stunned crowd, Margaret between them. Outside, the cold Boston air cut sharp and clean. A black car waited at the curb. Daniel stopped. "I can't leave like this. My father, he's sick. I need to get home." Alexander looked at him carefully. "What's wrong with him?" "Dementia," Daniel said quietly. "He forgets who I am sometimes." Alexander nodded once. "Then you understand." Daniel looked up. Alexander opened the car door. "Get in, we'll talk." Daniel hesitated only a moment before stepping inside, unaware that he had just crossed a line that would divide his life into before and after. As the car pulled away, Alexander watched Daniel in the reflection of the glass. For the first time in years, the monster felt something unfamiliar stir inside his chest. Gratitude.
The city lights blurred past the car windows as silence settled in. Daniel sat stiffly in the back seat, hands folded in his lap, the faint scent of lemon cleaner still clinging to his uniform. He wasn't used to leather seats or drivers who didn't speak unless spoken to. Across from him, Margaret hummed softly, her eyes half closed, drifting between moments. Alexander watched them both. "You live alone?" Alexander asked. "With my father," Daniel replied. "What's left of him." Alexander nodded. He didn't press further. Some truths didn't need digging. They surfaced on their own. The car stopped in front of a modest brick building in South Boston. Paint peeled from the window frames. The porch light flickered like it had been tired for years. "This is home," Daniel said, embarrassed. Alexander stepped out first. "It's warm," he said simply. Inside, the air smelled of old books and black coffee. A radio played low, some forgotten jazz tune. In a recliner near the window sat Arthur Reed, thin and fragile, his eyes fixed on nothing and everything at once. Daniel's chest tightened. "Dad?" Arthur blinked. "Danny?" he asked, hopeful. Daniel smiled. "Yeah, Dad, it's me." Arthur's face softened. "You're late. Your mother made stew." Daniel swallowed. His mother had passed 10 years ago. Alexander noticed everything, but said nothing. Margaret wandered toward the bookshelf. "Arthur," she said warmly, "you still keep the history books in the wrong order." Arthur looked up, confused. Then he laughed. "They move when I sleep." She laughed with him. For a moment, time slowed. 3 people, bound not by wealth or status, but by memory slipping through their fingers. In the kitchen, Alexander lowered his voice. "How much does his care cost?" Daniel hesitated. "More than I make, less than he deserves." Alexander studied the cracked countertops, the medicine bottles lined up like soldiers. "You work nights?" "2 jobs sometimes." "Any help?" Daniel shook his head. "Just me." Alexander exhaled slowly. He had seen men beg. He had seen men bargain. Daniel did neither. "You could have asked for something tonight," Alexander said. "Most would have." Daniel met his eyes. "I didn't help your mother for a reward." That answer landed heavier than any plea. Alexander reached into his coat, not for money, but for a card. He placed it on the table. "My number," he said. "Tomorrow, I want you to come see me." Daniel frowned. "Sir, not charity, an opportunity." Daniel looked at the card like it might burn him. "I'm just a janitor." Alexander's gaze sharpened. "No, you're a man who didn't look away." Margaret called from the living room. "Alex," she said, suddenly frightened. "Where are we?" Alexander rushed to her side. "Home soon, Mama." She looked at Daniel. "You're a good boy," she whispered. "Your children will honor you." Daniel smiled politely. He had no children, or so Alexander believed. Outside, before leaving, Alexander turned back. "One more thing." "Yes?" "My mother felt safe with you." Daniel nodded. "So did my father." Alexander paused. "Tomorrow," he repeated, 9 a.m. That night, after they left, Daniel sat beside his father until he fell asleep again. He stared at the card in his hand. Power frightened him. Hope frightened him more. Miles away, in a high-rise overlooking the harbor, Alexander poured himself a drink he didn't touch. Find out everything about Daniel Reed and his family. The man hesitated. Everything? Alexander's eyes darkened. Especially what he's hiding.
Morning came softly. Daniel Reed hadn't slept. He sat at the small kitchen table, watching steam rise from a cup of untouched coffee, while his father dozed in the recliner. The card Alexander Hale had given him lay flat between his hands, as if it were a verdict waiting to be read. At 8:45, Daniel locked the door and kissed his father's forehead. "I'll be back," he whispered. Arthur stirred. "Don't be late, son. Some doors only open once." Daniel froze. "Dad?" Arthur was already asleep again. The Hale shipping building stood like a monument of glass and steel near the harbor. Daniel felt small walking through the revolving doors, his worn jacket suddenly too thin, his shoes too loud against the polished floor. Alexander was already waiting. "You came," he said. Daniel nodded. "I said I would." They sat across from each other in a quiet office overlooking the water. No assistants, no lawyers, just two men from very different worlds. "I looked into you," Alexander began. Daniel stiffened. "Not to threaten you," Alexander added, "to understand you." Alexander slid a folder across the desk. Inside were photographs. Daniel's breath caught. A modest suburban home, a luxury apartment building in New York. 3 young adults stepping out of high-end vehicles. One of them, a man in a tailored suit, looked painfully familiar. "My sons," Daniel said quietly. Alexander leaned back. All successful. One in finance, one in technology, one in real estate. Daniel closed the folder. "I never hid them. You never spoke of them. They didn't want my name, not publicly." Silence stretched. "My wife died when they were young. Her family was wealthy, powerful. They took the boys in, gave them everything I couldn't. Schools, safety, connections. And you stayed behind," Alexander said. Daniel nodded. "I chose peace over pride." Alexander's eyes narrowed. "They're worth millions." "Yes." "And you clean floors." "Yes." "Why?" Daniel's voice softened. "Because they needed a father who loved them, not a man fighting their world." Alexander studied him. "Do they help you?" "No," Daniel said simply. "They offered. I refused." "Why refuse?" Daniel thought of his father, of medication bills, of quiet nights. "Because love with conditions isn't love," he said. Alexander looked away. "You could have lived comfortably," Alexander said. "Instead, you disappeared." Daniel shrugged. Someone had to stay ordinary. Alexander stood and walked to the window. "You know what power does?" Daniel shook his head. "It isolates. It teaches people to kneel or to crush." He turned back. "You knelt to no one last night." Alexander opened another folder. "This," he said, "is my mother's medical plan. Private care, best specialists. I want you to help oversee it." Daniel blinked. "Why me?" "Because she trusts you, and because I don't trust anyone else." Daniel hesitated. "I'm not qualified." "You're honest," Alexander said. "That's rarer." Daniel exhaled slowly. "And my father?" Alexander slid a third document forward. "Full-time in-home care, memory specialists, transportation, no cost." Daniel's hands trembled. "This isn't charity," Alexander said firmly. "It's employment with a salary." Daniel looked up. "Why are you doing this?" Alexander's voice dropped. "Because last night you reminded me of the man I used to be." A knock interrupted them. A security officer stepped in. "Sir?" "One more thing." Alexander's gaze sharpened. "And?" The officer hesitated. "Your mother's foundation, it's been funded quietly for years." Alexander turned to Daniel slowly. "You've been donating," he said. Daniel lowered his eyes. "Anonymously." "With what money?" Daniel met his stare. "My son's dividends. They insisted." Alexander laughed once, short and disbelieving. "A janitor who raised millionaires and gave away their wealth." Alexander extended his hand. "Daniel Reed, welcome to a world that finally sees you." Daniel hesitated, then shook it. Outside, unseen by both men, 3 luxury cars pulled up to the curb, and 3 grown sons stepped out.
Daniel Reed felt it before he saw them. The air in the room shifted, like a memory waking up.
Alexander turned toward the glass wall just as 3 men entered the building lobby below. They moved with confidence, tailored coats, familiar faces from magazines and business channels. People stepped aside for them without being asked. Daniel's chest tightened. His sons. Ethan, the oldest, sharp eyes, controlled posture. Lucas, the middle, calculating, always watching. Noah, the youngest, still carrying that hint of softness Daniel remembered from bedtime stories. They rode the elevator in silence. When the doors opened, the room felt suddenly too small. "Dad," Ethan said first. The word landed heavier than applause. Daniel stood slowly. He hadn't rehearsed this moment. He had imagined it 1,000 times, and yet nothing prepared him for how old they looked, how grown, how far away. "I didn't know you were in Boston," Daniel said. Noah smiled faintly. "You never told us you worked here." Daniel nodded. It wasn't important. Gluck glanced at Alexander. "We were told our father was being evaluated." Alexander folded his arms. "On the contrary, he's being honored." Silence. Ethan stepped forward. "We heard what you did last night for Mr. Hale's mother." Daniel shrugged. "She needed help." Noah swallowed. "You always did that, help people, even when it cost you." Daniel looked at them, really looked. "You boys cost me nothing." Alexander watched quietly as something sacred unfolded. Ethan cleared his throat. "We were wrong." Daniel didn't respond. "We thought," Lucas said carefully, "that separating from you would protect us." Daniel nodded. "It did." "No," Noah said, his voice breaking. "It protected our future, but erased our past." Daniel felt his eyes sting. "I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted you to walk freely." Ethan reached into his coat and placed a document on the table. "A trust," he said, "in your name. No conditions, no secrecy." Daniel pushed it back. "I didn't raise you to buy me." Noah stepped forward. "You raised us to stand up, like you did." Daniel's shoulders trembled. Alexander turned toward the window, giving them privacy. Daniel looked at his sons. "Your grandfather is dying." All 3 stiffened. "He forgets your names, but he remembers holding you, rocking you." Ethan's eyes filled. "Take us to him." That evening, the small South Boston house filled with life it hadn't known in years. Arthur Reed woke to unfamiliar faces and then laughed. "My boys," he said, "you came back tall." They sat around him, told stories, held his hands. Arthur looked at Daniel. "You did good," he whispered. Daniel nodded. "I tried." Days later, the story spread, but not the way the media wanted. There were no headlines about secrets or wealth. Only this: a janitor who never asked to be seen, a man who raised good sons, a life that mattered quietly. Alexander funded a foundation in Daniel's name, supporting caregivers, the forgotten, the overlooked. Daniel declined the spotlight. He returned to work, not with a mop, but with purpose. And one night, as he walked past the ballroom where it all began, a young janitor looked up nervously at him. "Sir," the boy said, "do you belong here?" Daniel smiled. "Yes," he said softly, "I always did."